Well, good morning, guys. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the pastors here on staff. Honored that you are here with us to celebrate King Jesus. I don't know if I could say it any other better way than that last song that we just sang. That is why we exist as a church. We exist to exalt Jesus, to make sure that he reigns and he rules and that he is supremely in authority, and that through that authority, our world would be changed. From the streets to the city to the world. That's why we exist, and I love that song. It's one of my favorite songs of all time, but I'm glad you guys are here. So we're continuing a series called Connecting with God. I get to talk about stillness today, so if you have your Bible, I would love for you to flip to Psalm 46. As always, I preach through the NIV translation of the Bible, so if you have a Bible app, you can use that. You can use your physical Bible, but we'll be in Psalm 46 today. And we'll also, at the very end, jump to the Gospel of John for a really cool little parallel there. But we'll be talking about stillness and how God speaks in the midst of stillness. And that's how we actually connect with God beautifully in the midst of the chaotic world we're in. So stillness is where God speaks. That's what we're jumping into today. So when I was in third grade, I had one of the greatest teachers of all time. If you could imagine my temperament, I'm a little bit of an insane human. I'm an Energizer bunny. I really don't ever stop. Actually, one of our children is just like me, which I feel so badly for their teachers because there's so much energy. But I had this amazing third grade teacher, and we nicknamed her Miss Frizzle. Which, if you're a 90s kid, you know what I'm talking about. This is the Magic School Bus teacher, red hair, frizzy hair. Actually, she reminds me a lot of Megan, our children's kind of director a little bit. I don't ever want to say that, but then I don't know. And then I just said it online, so now she knows. So we had this teacher, she was so much fun. Like, she was unbelievably awesome. Every day there was activities. Every day there was something exciting to do. She mixed it up. I think that was in part because of how terrible I was as a kid. So she was just like, got to get this Shaw kid contained somehow. But anyway, she's incredible. And to this day, I remember how she started every single class. It was so awesome because I had no other teacher like this. Third grade, I think like our class ratio is 80 to 20 boy-girl ratio. So it was like not 80 kids, 20 kids, but 80-20% split. So if you can think about that, all that third grade boy energy is off the charts. And we'd come into school, the first day of class, come into class and it's, 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and we're just like hopped up on whatever cereal, in the 90s that they sold, which was just bowls of sugar. But we'd come in during recess and we were just amped, like just so unbelievably amped and so we'd come in, and of course, no one's taking their seat. No one's listening. Everything is just incredibly crazy. And Miss Frizzle would just sit there, and she'd see us all coming in. She'd be smiling, and she'd walk. This is her desk, right? It was much bigger, but this would be her desk. And she'd just walk around, and she'd stand about 3 or 4 feet away from her desk. And she was one of those hippie teachers that had all the desks in a circle. This was before that was a cool thing to do. And so all the desks were in a circle. And she'd just stand in the middle, and it was chaos, crazy, all that. And she'd just start talking. Hey, kids, hope your day was well. Hope recess was good. And sure enough, you can imagine that tone. There's no way she's being heard, right? Like, that doesn't, like, because if you think about it, if it's just a raging group of 30 lunatic third graders, right? Chaos, there's no way that anybody's going to hear Miss Frizzle say, oh, hey, how's everybody doing? I hope you had a good day. And here's the thing. Every other teacher I've ever had, they would do the thing. They would, hey, everybody, we're starting. They had a bell. I had a 5th grade teacher have a bell. Ding, 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 ding. I was like, we're not cattle, dude. Like, this is ridiculous. But like, she never did that. She never raised her voice. She never rang a bell. She never initiated anything that would be over and above the chaos to get our attention. Instead, she would just softly say, good morning. I hope your day is good. I hope recess was fun. And slowly, the murmuring would stop. And slowly, kids would start holding each other accountable. They'd be like, yo, get into your seat. Miss Frizzle's talking. We're like, oh gosh, we got to get into our seat. Sit down and get into the desk and pull your stuff out. And it was this incredible thing. It's actually something, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed this, but when I start my sermons, almost every single time you guys are still talking, I just kind of start talking. I picked this up in 3rd grade. Never really got rid of it. It's this weird tick I've got. When there's chaos in the room, I'll just start talking. And I learned something incredible from her. It's that in the stillness and in the simplicity, that's where calm dominates chaos. It's when there's stillness and there's simplicity, that's when calm begins to take over chaos, which is so counterintuitive to our world. We think in order for you to stop chaos, you have to be louder than chaos. In order for you to stop the whirlwind, so to speak, you have to penetrate it with an even louder voice or an even more impenetrable, marketing scheme or whatever it is. But it's actually stillness. And as we've been talking about in this series, connecting with God, we've talked about connecting with God in nature, connecting with God and figuring out who the heck you are as a person, your purpose, your identity, locating yourself into relationship with God. All of these different things are ways that you can experience God, you can connect with God. But we would be remiss if we did not talk about one of the most important ways that you see all throughout Scripture, the narrative of how people have connected with God for all of human history. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the importance of connecting with God in the midst of stillness. That God is in the stillness. That God is speaking in the midst of the silence, that in the midst of chaos, that is actually where we get to connect with God the most. Chaos of our world, the chaos of our lives. Most of you experience this daily, the chaos of the inner critic of your minds, where you're contemplating 10,000 different things and your mind's going 1,000 different directions. The only way that we experience connection with God in moments like that is not by dominating it, but it's by being still in the midst of it. And it's there, when we're still, that's where God speaks. So today, my only goal, I've got 3 points, but my only agenda is to convince you that the good life that Jesus has for you is a still life. And I want to convince you that being still is more important than almost anything else. That learning silence, learning stillness, learning the steps you have to take to get to that place with God where you actually can be still and he doesn't have to straitjacket you and you're just like losing it in front of him, but you're still enough to go, God, you're in control. That's what I want to convince you of. Honestly, the best way to say it is what Psalm 46 verse 10 says. This will be up on the screen above me. Psalm 46, verse 10, this is what I want you to believe and live out every single day of your life. This is what the psalmist says. He says, this is God speaking. He says, be still and know that I am God. I'll be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. But this command in all of life, no matter all the chaos, it is to be still. So that's my goal this morning, convince you that a still life is a good life. And so the way that we're going to do this is we're going to study all of Psalm 46. We're going to work through it. I'm going to kind of dissect it a little because Psalm 46 is really beautiful. And for the musicians or the artists in the room, I think you'll really find how it's structured to be really appealing. But as we get into Psalm 46, we'll look at these 3 specific kind of ways that we can pursue stillness, so to speak. And so kind of give you some context, and then we'll get into the 3 points here. So Psalm 46, if you actually have your physical Bible, you can kind of look at it. If it doesn't really show this on the digital versions here, but Psalm 46 is really, really, really amazing. So it has that anthemic verse 10, which most people would say that's like the bridge of this song. That's the Psalms are just like any other song that you've ever heard before. There's different sections. There's verses, there's choruses, there's pre-choruses, there's stanzas, there's intros. If you don't know anything about music, I'm teaching you music right now. There's just sections, and this is why you get some songs, parts of songs stuck in your head. It's because it's got a super catchy bridge or a super catchy chorus, or the stanza just, oh my gosh, it gets you so excited. And so verse 10 is that triumphant statement that you're supposed to leave with. Be still. And you're like, okay, That's amazing. But then you have these little sections that are verses. You have verses 1 through 3. That's verse 1. That's kind of like the point, the meat of the song itself starts to come out in verse 1. Then you have verses 4 through 6, which is verse 2. So it goes from verse 1, tells a story. Then it goes from verse 2 and it tells another story. But then in verses 7 and 11, you have these pre-choruses or these stanzas. These are reverberated statements. And in an a cappella situation, which is likely how this would have been sung, those two verses, 7 and 11, would have been repeated over and over again as the remainder of the psalm was being sung. So it would have been kind of stuck in your head. And then in verses 8 through 9, we have verse 3. And so really beautifully, what we have here is a 3-point sermon. It's 3 points to a psalm. But the whole resonating theme is how to be still. How to experience God in the midst of our stillness. And so as we kind of jump through it, you'll see these verses correlate together. So we'll talk about, we'll just start with point number 1. If you're a note taker, you can write this down. But in order for us to experience the stillness of God and hear him speak, we first need to take up verse 1, which is we hide in him. We hide in God. If we want to be people who pursue stillness, we have to take the first step, and we have to hide in him. Look at what verses 1 through 3 says here. Psalmist says, God is our refuge and our strength. God is an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, so if God is this incredible, magnificent God who protects and we can find refuge in him, we can find our strength in him, that in any situation that we find ourselves in, that he is the present help in the midst of that trouble, he says, therefore, we will not fear. We're not going to fear. That sounds pretty ridiculous, to be honest with you, because you think, like, how can you stop fear? Like, isn't fear a reaction to something? Isn't fear just an innate thing that takes place? Well, in theory, fear is a biological response to something going on. But the author is saying that there's something greater that should usurp your biological response to a situation. Your brain's response to a situation should not be the only thing that tells you how to respond. But in fact, there's a truth claim bigger than that, which is God is our refuge. So we will not fear. Though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. This language that's just talking about the fallenness of the world and it's crumbling before them. He says, we're not going to fear about those things. Though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, we'll not fear. God is our refuge and God is our strength. This point 1, hide in him. It's one of the most challenging first steps. If we're being completely honest, if we want to begin to pursue stillness in life, guys, what this verse says to us, honestly, is wildly frustrating, and it's the reason why I think almost all of us struggle to be still, is because this phrase, this section here, tells us to do something that is completely counterintuitive. It's completely counterintuitive. Like, think about it. It says when the earth quakes and the mountains shake and the oceans roar and all of this stuff is happening, that is symbolic for saying when the worst of all situations can possibly be at the front doorstep of your life, don't freak out. I mean, how many of you are good at that? You better not raise your hand. Nobody. Don't put that. You thinking nope, you're not. You're not good at, right? None of us are good at this. And it's so hard because this goes literally against our biology. We were this is what psychologists and all different people, they talk about this. You experience something that's overwhelming, that's daunting, that's terrifying, that challenges you, and you sit there and you go, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to do. They say that what happens in our brain is one of a couple of options, fight, flight, or freeze. You guys ever heard this before? There's your body is only capable of doing a couple of things in the midst of absolute chaos. You fight, which means you get up and you kind of got this like biological, it's been trained into you and it's just who you are and it's kind of your disposition, your upbringing, it's also your genetics. And you're like, a bad situation takes place, I'm punching some throats. I'm kicking some butts. What do I need to do to stop the oppressive situation from happening? You fight. But then there's other people that freeze. They just sit there. And they get into a stalemate of inaction because they're so freaked out, they don't know what to do. This happens all the time. You're in shock, you're terrified, you're overwhelmed. And so we fight, we freeze, or we flight, we run away. Now that's more or less the disposition, I think, of a lot of people. I don't think that most people sit there just in freeze or sit there in fighting. I think the natural disposition for most of us is that when everything is destroying everything and you feel so undone, you can't even get out of bed, you can't even talk to your friends, you can't come to church, you don't even feel like it's worth living. All these things, we have this response that our biology tells us to have. And yet this psalm, these verses, with the overriding theme of verse 10, be still, know that I am God. The psalmist invites you to go against your biology, go against your psychological dispositions, and he says, hide in God. Which is wild. Because think, he says, God is our refuge, that God is our strength, that God is our ever-present help in trouble. And so because of that, we will not fear. Now that is so frustrating because I know for a fact that every single one of you thinks that sounds like a great idea, but you don't know what's actually going on in my life, Josh. That sounds like a really good idea. Oh, God is my help, and he's my refuge, and he's all these ever-present things. That's super cool. Why is my life still a wreck? What's going on with this situation? Why is it's a theological truth that we don't allow to actually change our reality. But the psalmist says, be still, God is your refuge. Be still, God is your strength. I know you're fight, flight, or freezing. I know that these things are going on. God made you. He knows your disposition. But also God loves to create in you a sense of, I need to trust something greater than me. And so the psalmist invites us, and he says, would you hide in God? Would you take a moment as you are undone? You are overwhelmed. You feel like you've got nothing left. And instead of running away to something else, instead of fighting something that's not even actually your enemy anyways, like mind you, like the reason why you fight people, the reason why you fight against a situation, the reason why you go against something is because you're convinced that the person in front of you is the enemy. But Paul says in the book of Ephesians that we don't fight against flesh and blood. And so that we even have a presumption, the person in front of me is against me. No. There is someone behind that person. And that someone behind that person is Satan. And there's an evil, corrupt world begging for your attention to sidetrack you, to destroy you, to carnivorously eat you alive. And this text says, don't do that. Hide in God. I love that he says refuge and strength and an ever-present help, because it doesn't mean that we run to some obscure being that theoretically might be able to help us. Refuge, strength, ever-present help. That means that when you hide in God, you're not hiding in some corner hoping that nothing happens to you. You're not hiding in some closet thinking that the lock is going to be strong enough. You're literally hiding in the presence of the God who created the mountains. Now that's theoretically, I mean, that's existentially sounds really great. No, it's like, no, this is why it's so important, guys, that you need to be believers, that Jesus is not just some really good guy who saved you, but that he is the supreme God who created everything. Because if you believe that he's the supreme God who created everything and ordains everything, then running to him and hiding in him is so much better than anything you could ever do. It may not feel good biologically, physiologically to do that, but that's irrelevant to the truth of what it is. If God is supreme, then he is worth hiding in. He is worth putting our trust in. He is worth going to. And so guys, if you want to live a still life, the very first thing you need to recognize is that chaos is going to happen. So what's your first reaction going to be? Are you going to fight it, or are you going to trust in God? Are you going to hide in God, rather? You have to begin to ask this: how do I hide in God? And here's the deal. This will look absolutely foolish. Can I just admit that? If you have an experience of chaos and you decide to hide in God and seek his refuge and strength and not the strength of the world will think you're a lunatic. Because the world, I mean, this is what the world says, right? Like if you're silent, if you don't fight against it, if you're silent, then you're actually for it. It's all a bunch of nonsense. The world is trying to convince you to get into the fight, and Jesus is actually beckoning you. He's going, that's the kingdom of that's not my world. Let them ruin themselves. My kingdom is not of this world. It will be this world, but it's not yet. It's already, but not yet. So we'll be considered foolish, but this is how you this is how you take steps towards stillness. You hide in God. You sit on your couch and you go, God, I'm hiding in you today. You come to church and you sit and you go, God, I am hiding in you today. So the first thing we do is we hide in God. The second thing the psalmist tells us to do is to trust in him. Not just hide in him, even though he's protective, but also to trust, to know that he has good plans and he knows what's going on. Verses 4-6, look at how he continues in the psalm. He says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fail. She will not fall. God will help her at day or a break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. But I love this phrase. One day we should write a song about this. This next phrase is amazing. Kingdoms fall, semicolon, which means but he, being God, lifts his voice and the earth melts. Now here's what's wild, guys. The verse prior to this talks about how all of the earth is quaking and shaking and mountains are falling and the oceans are roaring. And because the earth is doing what the earth does, which is does its own chaotic thing, we're like, oh no, I need God. But it's amazing. When the same exact situation takes place, where the earth melts, so to speak, everything is kind of falling into being. It's being remade again. But when it's initiated, not by the chaos of this world, but by God, it's actually something triumphant. Which is a total mind shift for us. What if God didn't allow you to lose your job, but he actually initiated the loss of your job? Uh-oh. What if God didn't allow, because the world is so chaotic, for those friendships to fall apart, but God actually spoke and those friendships fell apart? It's amazing. God can do things that look like chaos, but they're actually redemptive. This is the cross. It's the most chaotic thing you could possibly imagine. Jesus getting whipped, beaten, nailed to a cross. Everybody's weeping. Friends are going everywhere. There's betrayal all over the place. And yet, in Jesus' final breath, salvation is secured. It's out of chaos that redemption takes place. And so we have these incredible statements being made about God. But here's what I want you to notice in this verse, in this whole idea of we need to trust in him. I want you to notice this. In this verse, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's actually about the people of Israel, the actual ethnic people of Israel. He talks about how Israel can trust in God's presence, that there's this river flowing in and out of the city of God, that Israel is not going to be ruined, all of these things. But if you think about that in context, that actually doesn't really make too much sense. There's a lot of anthemic things being said about the holy city. If you were to go read that again, the problem is that out of the 3,000 years that this psalm existed, about 2,000 of those years, there is no temple. I don't know if you guys know this. The first temple of Israel was destroyed about 480 BC. About 2,500 years ago, it was absolutely ransacked, destroyed. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, they came, they ruined the whole entire thing. And then later on, the Israelites got to rebuild the temple again. But then in 70 AD, right after, and Jesus even says it's going to be destroyed. The temple is destroyed again. So you would think, wait, a psalm all about how God is going to bring all of this flourishing to the temple and to the city and to all these things. Well, this psalm makes no sense then. It doesn't really apply to us then, right? Like that's kind of like how you should think about it. But here's what's crazy. For 3,000 years, people have been singing this song, celebrating this song, and the context behind the river and the city and the temple has become almost irrelevant because it's not about the circumstance. Those verses that I just read, verses 4 through 6, they're all about God. That God is the one who is within his people. That God will help at the time that he needs to help. That even though the nations are doing what they're doing, it will be him that raises his voice. This is what's so incredible about the Psalms and about God. It's him saying, I don't care if nations are destroyed, if your situation is great or horrible, if things seem to make all the sense in the world or no sense at all, none of that determines how good God is. None of that determines whether or not you can trust in him or not. No, you can always trust in him because he is always there. He is faithful. He is present. He loves you. He cares for you. That when he speaks, the earth melts. I mean, this is 3,000 years. This is the truth. It doesn't matter if the city is destroyed. God reigns. Jesus rules. Why do we trust in God? Like, guys, get this. Even when, it is so unbelievably easy to trust in God. Like, if this psalm had everything to do with, simple life and God's in the resting place, and there's like a Psalm 23 type of psalm, it would almost seem to make more sense. I'm going to trust in God because he brings me to green pastures and still waters. And it's like, that's cool, but the greatest part about this portion of the psalm is that because he talks about so much chaos, it's almost like it's more relevant to our own personal lives. Like, to be honest with you, I'm not living Psalm 23 every day. I'm just not. I mean, most of you, even if you're not a Christian, you probably know this psalm, that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me to green pastures and still waters, and he nourishes my, and even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'm going to fear no evil, for God is with me, and he's going to put me at a table in the presence of my enemies, and my cup is going to overflow. That is just, honestly, guys, not my life. My life is the city is ruined and everything is falling apart, and I really hope we have enough chicken nuggets for the kids tonight. Right? Can I get an amen? This is real life, right? It's so easy to be still when you're on the beach in Hawaii with a Mai Tai. It's super easy to ruthlessly eliminate hurry when you don't got anything to do. It's easy. Don't you think it's so funny, that book, Ruthless Elimination Hurry, comes out with John Mark Comer, he pastors up here in LA. I can make fun of him a little bit. It's so funny that book got so popular during COVID. It's like, of course it did. No one was doing anything. Guys, it's when you get the divorce papers served to you, that's when you start wondering, do I trust God? It's when that medical bill comes that you didn't think was going to actually come, and it wrecks your accounts for a year. That's when trusting in him, that's when he needs to speak. It's when the terminal diagnosis that you thought was gone comes back. That's when you trust. Our circumstances, they're not predicated. It's not goodness and then trust. No, it's trust and then stillness. Why? Because he will lift his voice and the earth will melt. And let's get to point number 3. Point number 3, we need to not only hide in God and trust in him to experience stillness, but 3, we need to behold him. We need to behold him. Look at Psalm 46, verses 8 through 9. Verses 8 through 9. The psalmist says, come and see what the Lord has done. I want you to notice that. If you have your physical Bible, I want you to underline, come and see. It's very important. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations that he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. It's basically an anthemic statement that God stops the chaos, stops the wars. He stops it all. But there's this phrase at the very beginning in verse 8 that is absolutely profound. Come and see what the Lord has done. Come and see. That phrase is used all over the Bible. Literally from Genesis to Revelation, come and see explicitly in that exact phrase. There's a lot of ways that you could theoretically say that, but that phrase, come and see, invitation to witness, all over the scriptures. And almost every single time, come and see is an invitation to come and behold the greatness of God. It's not, hey, come and see this. This is ridiculous. Look at what happened here. No. It's not watching fail videos or watching people that get in, like watching the dumpster fire, the car wreck. It's not gossip. Hey, come and see. Come and listen to what happened over here. None of that. It's come and see just how incredible our God is. It's an invitation out of whatever you're in into beholding something greater than what you were in. And so you see this time and time and time again, Genesis to Revelation. In the Psalms, it's all over the place. And what I love is that the author of the Gospel of John, his name is John, one of Jesus' disciples, he uses this phrase more than any other author. And in particular, there's this amazing story in the Gospel of John where Jesus meets the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. Do you guys know this story? It's a beautiful story. For those who don't know it, I'm going to share quickly what it is. There's this woman, Jesus and her are well, the context is that Jesus and the disciples have been doing a ton of ministry in the desert of Judea, and they're walking and they're coming and they're going. There's all this complexity happening. And Jesus is exhausted. The disciples are exhausted. Ministry work is so hard. And Jesus gets to this well and he tells his disciples, go into town, get some food, I'm starving. And as he's at this well, there's this woman there, but it's in the middle of the day. And that doesn't make any sense because you shouldn't be at the well in the desert in the middle of the heat. You should go in the morning. You should go in the evening. You should go any time other than noon. It just doesn't make any sense. And they get into this conversation and we come to find out that this woman has been in 4 or 5 marriages. She's experienced incredible divorce and betrayal. She's been abused. She's been neglected. She's been socially ostracized in unbelievable ways. And the only reason she's at the well is because she's thirsty and has been so pulled away from all of society. She has to drink all by herself. She has to live all by herself. She has nothing. And Jesus begins to have this incredible conversation with her where he says, do you know who's standing before you? Do you know who's sitting in front of you? If you knew who I was, you wouldn't just be it wouldn't be me asking for a drink, but it would be you, woman, asking me for a drink of living water. And then he begins to share that he is the one who can bring salvation and deliverance and wholeness and life and forgiveness. And like literally he basically says, your entire life is an absolute mess. He tells her that. He goes, yeah, you've had tons of husbands. It's not good. And this most recent guy, you're sleeping with him. It's not good. This is a horrible, horrible, horrible situation. He fully recognizes her brokenness, and she knows it too. But then on the flip of it, he goes, but I want to give you living water. Water that will never run out, that will nourish your soul. It won't just fill your body with what you need. It will literally cleanse you. And then what does she do after she experiences this? Well, John tells us. Remember what I told you to underline. John tells us in John chapter 4, verses 28 through 29. He says this. He says, then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, what? Come, see. A man who told me everything I did. Could this be the Messiah? That word Messiah means, could this be the Savior? The one who comes to deliver, the one who comes to forgive, the one who comes to bring life. She goes, this guy just told me everything, and I'm going to go back to the people who want nothing to do with me, and I'm going to invite them to see what this man can do. She experiences the goodness of God. She experiences his power, his love, his mercy. And you see this all throughout the Gospel of John, where people will hear that Jesus heals someone, that Jesus saves someone, that Jesus forgives someone, that he delivers someone from demonized possession, whatever it may be. And there's almost always an invitation. Come and see him. Come and behold this God that we serve. Friends, if you want to experience stillness in your life, if you want to experience a sense of, God, you are near and you are speaking and you love me and you are with me. If you want that desperately in your soul, which I believe all of us do, the reality is that when you read the story of the woman at the well, it's not that we're Jesus and that this woman's broken. It's that every single one of us are that woman. Every one of us are her. And the invitation to stillness is an invitation to behold Jesus. Is to come and see his wondrous works. How many of you need to be reminded of all that God has already done? Because this is why Jesus was publicly crucified and killed. You do realize that Jesus could have died for the sins of the world without being publicly crucified. It's not like God was incapable of forgiving the sins of the world as if Jesus died in a more abstract way or whatever it might be. I mean, the Old Testament scriptures clearly prophesied that he was going to have to be cursed, hung on a tree, all these things. But that was to fulfill an incredible anthemic, world-viewing, visual experience. The God of the universe is being crucified. Behold him. He's dying for you. And then why did he rise and then physically walk around for 40 days when he could have just went to heaven and it would all be sealed up? Because we needed to see. The first believers needed to behold the wounds in his hands. They needed to behold his pierced side. They needed to see him in action, because when you behold him, then you can be still before him. You wait, and you wait, and you allow him to take whatever the spears are in your life and let him break them. Let him take the shields that are up in opposition and fighting and in defense, and let him tear it to shreds and burn it up. The only way that you can be still, guys, is when you behold who God is. You come and see, Psalm 46, verses 8 through 10. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolations that he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, be still and know that I am God. So band, you guys can come on up here. We hide in him, we trust in him, we behold him. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to exercise this together. going to actually do this. It would be kind of goofy if I taught you about how to be still and then we just like sprinted out of here. That'd be kind of ridiculous. So what we're going to do is, this is actually an ancient exercise. It's been around for 1,000 years at least. The early Desert Fathers used to do this in Christian history. And whenever the world was in disarray, whenever they were going out and it just felt like everything was falling apart, there were these practices that they'd put in. These rhythmic cadence kind of ways to pray, and it would initialize in their spirit a desire for stillness. And we're going to do this. If you want to write this down, you can. These are, and honestly, what I'm going to have us do, I would encourage you to do this every day. Like, this is a great way to ask God to bring stillness to your life. And so you can write these 4 things down, but we'll do them together. You breathe. It's funny, it just came to my mind. I played in a hockey tournament yesterday, and I had 4 games in 3 hours, and I've never felt so old in my entire life. I felt ancient. It was awful. And one of the young guys, I was skating around, and it was called an Ironman. You had there were 12-minute games, no subs, all-out sprint, and at minute 5, we're all just like not sprinting at that point. But one of these young guys on my team comes and, skates around me and he goes, "Breathe through your nose." And it was just like, because I was just sitting there like, he's like, so he just skates by me, "Breathe through your nose." So anyways, that just came to my mind. But might as well make this funny, right? So anyways, you breathe. We'll do this. You imagine, you offer, and then you receive. So you breathe, you imagine, you offer, and you'll receive. So what we're going to do, the band's going to just play softly, just piano, a little bit of pad. We're going to turn the lights down. And I want to encourage everybody in the room, close your eyes. We'll make sure, Tay, if you want to keep the band a little low so that way people can concentrate, that'd be good. So first, we just want to put ourselves in a physical posture of stillness. So if you're like cross-legged and cross-armed and all that stuff, let's just open up a little bit. Put your hands out, just open your chest. Your mind is probably already thinking 1,000 things. Oh my gosh, what's going on? What are we doing? All this, what happened this last week? You've got things you're already even imagining. You might even experience shame or guilt because of something that happened last week or yesterday or now. Just the only thing you need to do is just take really big, deep breaths. So just breathe with your nose. Just breathe. Breathe again. Don't let the ambulance distract you. Just. Now with your mind's eye, I want you to use your imagination to think about the thing that is keeping you from being still. So maybe it's money, maybe it's marriage, maybe it's kids, maybe it's your own personal life, you're worried about your job, but just picture, because you've already done it 1,000 times already, like just imagine the thing that overwhelms you and keep breathing. Imagine the pain that it causes you. Take notice, maybe your body is actually reacting. Maybe you're shaking. Maybe you're tearing up because that thing is so painful. It's okay. Breathe. And now I want you to use your imagination and try as best you can. Imagine Jesus is just standing right in front of you. You see him. And you can say it out loud if you want to, but in your mind, just say, Jesus, I offer you this thing. And you can put your hands out almost like you're giving it to him. Just offer him the thing that you're so overwhelmed by. Just say, Jesus, I offer you this. I offer you my kids. I offer you my school. I offer you my job. I offer you the losses, the betrayals. So you place your hands out and you say, God, hey, Jesus, take it. And as you breathe and as you offer, imagine Jesus puts his hands in your hands and you receive him. You're not exchanging your broken situation for a better situation. You're exchanging your broken situation for him. And so you receive him. We receive you, Jesus. So Jesus, today as we respond to you, we want to trust in you. We want to hide in you. We want to behold you. And so would you move? Come, Holy Spirit, move as we respond. In Jesus' name, amen. So we're going to sing a final song called Make Room. And I want to give you the freedom to respond however you would like. If you still need to sit and just take in what God's doing, do that. If you want to come to the front and kneel, do that. But the entire song is just a song of saying, I'm going to still myself to you and I'm going to make room for you, God. And so however you feel comfortable, you are more than welcome to do that. But if you're physically able and you want, we'll stand and then we'll respond. So let's sing together.